So, Game of Kings by Dorothy Dunnett, Part 3, Chapter 3 is what we're up to, which is called Mate for a Master. We have Richard coming back from I haven't been giving summaries of every chapter that we've been doing, but there is a good book. Wait. So this book, which I got a while back, well, I got it after I realised that I had fallen head over heels in love with this book, with Game of Kings. It does at the back have, this is by Laura Kane Ramsey. Thank you, Laura, for also providing a sort of summary of each chapter at the back. So I'll just read that one out. Richard comes back, is imprisoned after a row with Sibylla, after disobeying the Dowager Queen. Lymond talks to Mariotta. Lady Aries marries John Maxwell. Lymond meets with Christian to thank her. Christian becomes Tom Erskine's fiancé, and Buccleuch, Coulter and Hunter plan the taking of Lymond and the rescue of Will Scott. So Richard comes back and there's a discussion he has with Sibylla, which Christian thinks he handles terribly, and I'm trying to think of why that would be. So this is page 290. Sibylla says that if you insist on destroying Lymond personally, you will lose Mariotta altogether. And Richard, in his completely emotionally blind way, says, Lymond will take her life, or will she take her own? As in, he thinks what his mother means is that Mariotta's going to die. He doesn't in his wildest dreams think that Mariotta will leave her. He's quite self-centered in this manner. And what Sibylla means is that the only way that Richard could possibly win Mariotta's heart back, is for him to be magnanimous, not to continue to go after Lymond. I think Richard thinks that there's a formula to what he should be like, and if he sticks to that formula, everything will be okay. So then Sibylla says, if you'll abandon this madness, like the madness of trying to hunt down Lymond, I shall find her and bring her back to Mid-Coulter. And Christian at this point is like, how could Sibylla have read her son so wrong, so incorrectly? And I wonder what she means here. So Sibylla is being antagonistic towards Richard at the moment, but I think what Christian wanted Sibylla to say was to basically kind of have Sibylla pretend to be more on Richard's side, because at that point Richard just kind of loses it after that. He says a great line at the bottom of 290. This is genius, my irresponsible little brother, the infallible Lymond, with success at the end of each of his pretty fingers. That is fantastic. Adding that to my list of awesome descriptions of Lymond. At this point, Richard is defying the Queen Dowager's summons, which ends up getting him thrown in jail. This is definitely the first time I've been annoyed at Richard, but I can still understand exactly why he's reacting like this. Right, so Lymond gets back from George Douglas to the his little hideout where Mariotta is, and Margaret is no longer. And Molly is there. That was a really nice surprise. I really like it when like minor characters come back in at a later date in the story in a way that is very heartwarming. So Molly is there, and that's awesome. Lymond came in and she pulled herself up out of the chair and kissed him lightly and drew him into the fire. That's so lovely. She's such a mother hen, Molly is. The doctor that probably saved Mariotta's life, the doctor was not organised by Lymond. It was organised by Will. At the bottom of 295, it was that boy of yours, Scott, who insisted that we get the doctor, is what Molly's saying to Lymond. If Scott hadn't been there and Lymond had gone, Mariotta might have died? Is that what we're suggesting here? That this is the first sign that Lymond could have accidentally killed Mariotta via neglect if Will hadn't have been there? That's how I'm reading this. I know that in the previous chapter, Will had said to Matt, Turkey, you know what to do, go and get everything sorted for Mariotta, but there was no mention of whether or not there would be a doctor there. I mean, well done, Will. Who seemed to have taken command over Lymond in his absence. Who knows how long he's been gone? I'm assuming like a week or two. But Interestingly, Molly says to Lymond, also Andrew Hunter has been at the Ostrich Inn. And Molly's like, Hunter spent nearly a week with us for no very good reason. And seemed to have a lot of questions to ask on some curious subjects. Joanne saw Scott speaking to him. This is on page 296. So Molly has found out through Joanne, who I'm assuming is one of the girls there, that Andrew Hunter and Will Scott have been speaking. Andrew Hunter is weirding me out now. Is Andrew Hunter's older brother a friend of Lymond's? Is there something going on here? Am I completely off the mark? Probably. Okay. Molly says, take care. Hunter is a lot wiser than the child. It could mean trouble. Molly must be a really good judge of character, and she has judged Hunter as being quite sharp-minded. So that's interesting. Thank you, Molly, for that piece of information. And Lymond's reply to Molly saying, you know, Andrew Hunter could be trouble is, without trouble, how could we live? This is the second time Lymond has said something like this, and I can't remember where was the other time? Yes, on page 175, just as Lymond is entering the ostrich for the first time that we see, and Molly was like, where have you been? Lymond was like, why else are we here? Lymond has these quotes where he always says something along the lines of, why else are we here, when it's with regards to mischief and trouble and fun. So if I was Mariota, I would be feeling so stupid and hateful of myself at this point, and I would be putting all of my hope into Lymond. And Lymond makes her wait a whole week just chilling out in this room. I mean, I think she's sick, before he goes to see her. So yeah, it says here, top of page 297, Mariota wants to bathe her hurt pride and rejected love in the warm tides of Lymond's admiration. Wouldn't we all, Mariota? But there's something that you're about to learn about Lymond. The description of Lymond coming in, meticulously dressed, not at all as the first time she'd seen him. His hair was crisp and neat, his linen immaculate. But the half-hidden eyes and the flying mouth were the same. Flying mouth. So good. I don't think I could write and use a description flying mouth without it sounding completely weird, but these crazy ass descriptions of Lymond never sound weird because they're written by a master. Mariota is like, didn't you know that I've already left Richard? And Lymond is shocked. He's like, left Richard? This makes me think that Lymond knows his brother to be a good man, despite his emotional intelligence deficiencies. But he's genuinely surprised that Mariota has left Richard. Why? Because he never sent the jury. If Lymond had sent the jury, I said this before, if Lymond had sent the jury, they would have been rubies. They would have been red, because that's the first thing he said to her, and Lymond's attention to detail. Who else is sending the jury? Is it Andrew Hunter? If it is Andrew Hunter, no. It could be Johnny Bullough, because Johnny is here for the shits and giggles, and he has access to the house and access to the gold. Does he have access to the gold? This is the gold that's come from Lymond's mine. So it's someone there that has access to the gold. And Patty Liddell. Lymond is surprised that Mariota has left, which means that he thinks there is no reason for her to leave, so he's not sent the jury. Especially because Lymond's eyes are on the diamonds. Lymond's eyes were on the diamonds, one of the diamond jewelry that she got sent. And then he says slowly, I see. So not only is he speaking slowly and looking at these diamonds, if Lymond knew that he had sent this jewelry, he wouldn't have needed to look down and speak slowly. Whatever. Okay. This is annoying because the whole thing reads as if after that, as if he accepts that he sent them. And so this is all I'm going on right now. But the interesting thing is he wants all of the details then from that point on as to what's happened between Richard and Mariota before he chooses the persona that he decides to put on. Have you noticed that? So basically, he's kind of like personable and nice when he first walks into to Mariota's room. Then as soon as he finds out that Mariota left Richard, he's like, oh, shite. And then he realizes he needs more information before he keeps talking to her. So he basically sits back and lets Mariota say her thing about her poor marriage. So she tells him and relates the desertions and the disappointments and the disagreements and the follies which had stripped her of contentment and driven her to revolt. And Lymond's sitting there studying the floor. His mind is ticking. This is page 298. She starts crying. And at that point, Lymond has clearly made up his mind that he's about to be absolutely horrible to Mariota from this point onwards. Why is he being absolutely horrible? So that maybe she could make amends with Richard because she will see how stupid she was for liking Lymond. Because he says this, he stands up, paces to the end of the room, she's crying, and Lymond says, don't you think that I seem to be the disruptive serpent of the Ophites and not Richard? Then he tries to remind Mariota of all of the bad things that he was doing, and Mariota's like, you didn't know what you were doing. Oh my gosh, she's trying to save him. Brilliant line. Bottom of 298. All I ask in this world is half an hour where I don't know what I'm doing, but no one has granted me that privilege yet. That's just such a good line. It very much sums up the fact that Lymond just has to constantly be thinking. But the funny thing is, I think if Lymond was ever served a life where he could afford to be a little bit carefree and not have to think about what he was doing, he would get bored of it within like 5 minutes and he'd be cooking up trouble. So, I mean, Lymond, you say that, but I don't think you actually want that to be the reality. And then Lymond, just tears her apart, makes her cry. You have this entrancing and hagioscopic view of my character that is entirely your own. And says, basically says, what are you going to do? Stay here with me and with my gang of men? Come on. And poor Mariota. I do feel sorry for Mariota at this point. And this is a very hard scene to read, really. Mariota is completely taken apart, and then in her desperation is like, what about the jewelry? And Lymond calls her my angel, which is the first thing he called her back in the opening gambit. My angel, I had to prize you away somehow. So he's now using the knowledge of the jewelry and putting it into his story. So he's owning up to a crime that he didn't necessarily commit for her own good, so that he looks bad in her eyes, so that she might be able to make up with Richard, because he wants Richard to remain happy with his wife, because Lymond doesn't want to be a baron, because he's trying to help Scotland. Richard displaying emotion, it must have been magnificent. It's page 299. And at this point, and this is very interesting, so Mariota changes her tune. All of her desperate things she has grasped at trying to pull on his heartstrings have fallen on deaf ears. I mean, she was never going to win. Lymond had made up his mind to be an absolute asshole. So, I mean, she eventually says, why shouldn't he hurt you? You tried to kill him in Stirling. This is page 300, by the way. And this is the part where Lymond dislikes people. Lymond does not like people switching loyalties after they've been pressured. He does not like that. And Mariota literally just did that. Mariota's like, well, screw Lymond now, I'm going to go back to Richard. And he throws that back at her face, basically like saying, like, 3 seconds ago, you were saying that you came here because you want to be with me. And now you are accusing me of killing my brother. Like, which one is it? Like, be consistent. He says, I thought you loved me as the marabou loves its one-legged mother. And now he is mocking her and mocking her change of tune. Lymond cannot stand turncoats. Cannot stand them. But he was trying to force Mariota to not like him. This is what I think anyway. I think he was trying to do that. And then Molly must have heard this whole thing, because when he walked out. He slams the door in character. And Molly scolds him. Oh, that's so cute. I wanted to read the scolding, damn it. Expand on this, Dunnett. You just said Molly scolds him. I want the scene. We need Lymond getting scolded every now and then. So this is what annoys me. Basically, Lymond allowed Mariotta to escape with Will. Right, because he's not silly enough to know that Will wouldn't have tried to get Mariotta out. So he's allowed this to happen, which means that he could have gave Mariotta back in good faith to his brother. He could have used this to get some kudos, right? But he didn't. He made it look like Mariotta had to escape with Will. He does not want his family to like him. Lymond is determined for his family to not like him at all. This is just driving me mad. Oh, and then Andrew Hunter comes back and tells Janet Buccleuch. Janet and her scheming to get Will. Well, no, what Scott was with him as well. Basically says Will is with Lymond and has told Andrew Hunter about Lymond's scheme to sell Will. It's really cute. Top of page 301. Buccleuch is freaking out about this because he just wants his little boy back. Andrew says, I'll tell you if there's any updates. And Buccleuch is like, tell me if anything happens. And then his voice has the slightest rough edge. No. Okay, so now we have this time skip. Jack and Agnes is getting married. I want to be there. I want to be at this wedding. So it's at Holyrood, right? It was at Holyrood, right? Yeah, it was at Holyrood, the Palace of Holyrood, which I'm definitely going to visit when I go to Scotland because I'm 100% doing a Lymond tour of Scotland next summer, I hope, or the summer after. Linlithgow? The Fields of Linlithgow. Sounds beautiful. Sounds just beautiful. I felt like I was at this wedding. It was great. And Lymond was there. Because that's totally normal for Lymond to just be able to waltz into a wedding, obviously uninvited, and for no one to recognize him, but to be able to summon them. And now Agnes maybe knows that the letters weren't written by Jack, but were written by Lymond. I don't know. I think maybe she still feels that letters were written by Jack, but understands that them coming together would not have been possible without Lymond. I like the description of Lymond here on page 301. A cool fair-haired figure with an easy, disturbing voice. Easy and disturbing right after each other? Thanks, Dunnett. That's, it makes sense about Lymond, but easy and disturbing? It is such a disturbing description of a voice, and I love it so much. I love this line. Both Jack and the stranger, which is Lymond, so this is from Agnes's point of view, both Jack and the stranger seem to be affected with an uncommon sonority. I had to look up the word sonority. It means resonance. So an uncommon resonance. So she can see immediately between her new husband and Lymond that they have a vibe together that works. I love that line. I thought it was... And then we get to page 302 and Lymond now summons Christian, which is... This scene has done my heart over. So it's going to take a moment. Essentially, Christian thinks that she's been summoned by Tom Erskine to give her answer about if she's going to marry him, and it's this very stuffy little room, and she actually says, yeah, not the ideal place for a proposal, she thought drearily, but what on earth do you expect, woman? Some seedy cavalier to sing beneath your window? Oh, Christian. And then Lymond walks in and opens up. Lymond comments on her weight, opens up the windows, and says it's spring outside. It's so romantic. Imagine a man walking into your room, just opening up the windows and everything coming in and saying, it's spring outside. I mean, it's kind of cheesy, but it's It's so great. Christian is having a bodily reaction to Lymond that we all would have, probably, if that happened. She's stammering on her words, very unusual for Christian. This is all page 302, by the way. And she's described as having bodily and spiritual chaos. That's so true. Because Lymond has just walked into the room and says, I've stopped writing double letters under a pen name and I'm re-registering my interest with you in person. My first thought was, Lymond, don't do this, because she has to marry Tom because you're not good for her. Lymond. This whole conversation between them was just brilliant. I do want to highlight, Christian basically says to Lymond, you carry around hell with you, and Lymond is like, perhaps I do, but don't we make excellent fiends together? Basically throwing it right back at Christian, saying, well, you're also carrying around a little bit of secrecy, aren't you, as well? So Lymond says, I'm re-registering my interest, but then literally like a minute later says, I wish to convey my gratitude, but keep you at all costs out of my ruinous affairs. And Christian's like, well, how about you share your ruinous affairs or share your burdens, and perhaps it wouldn't affect you so much. And Lymond is just like, no. It's the first time he actually just says no. Lymond is not allowing anyone else to get caught up in all of his affairs. He doesn't want that. So I don't think he was actually disagreeing with Christian that, like, Lymond probably knows it would be good if he could share around his burden, but he's just not willing to do that. This is such an interaction, because what I wanted to point out that I have thought about probably way too deeply is that Lymond reveals more about himself in this interaction than I think he's ever revealed in the book. And that's with this, in this exact question here on page 304. Christian is basically saying, okay, and after everything, after you've got Samuel Harvey, like, what are you going to do? And Lymond's like, well, okay, I don't really know, but I'm going to try and get the truth out of him, even though it's easy to undermine a true statement, even if made under duress. And it's also a chance that people might not believe what Samuel Harvey says. And then even if he is believed, and then Lymond cuts himself off. And Christian says, yes. Go on. And Lymond laughs and he says, I don't know. I mean, I've got money. I may find I have the habit of lying on my face even when turned, like George Faustus. Lymond has cut himself short. This is what we've learned about him. We've learned so much from Lymond in this tiny interaction, and I think we have throughout this whole book, because Christian has basically asked him, when you have got what you want out of Samuel Harvey, what next? And Lymond has come up speechless. Like, he's actually had to stop himself and be like, well, what next? And he's saying, well, I have money. And then that statement of, I have the habit of lying on my face even when turned, is basically saying, and I did look this up, in this book, George Faustus was someone who, after they died, they kept trying to turn him onto his back, but he kept turning to face the ground, apparently. And I think the metaphor here is that even though Lymond has finally been proven innocent, Lymond seems to think he has the habit of continuing to keep turning the situation around so that he continues to create trouble or appear guilty. Like, Lymond here is saying, I don't know, am I the problem? Am I the one that keeps creating trouble because I can't live without drama? He's having some serious existential questions about himself in this one moment. And then Christian points this out, and then Lymond was like, well, this is an offstage observation. Please don't tell anyone. Offstage. So he was basically having these thoughts out aloud, and as if allowing himself for the first time to actually think about what next, and then or coming up to a brick wall, realizing that he doesn't really want to think about that because he doesn't like the answer. And then he makes a comment here about if he was to be in some heroic epic poem, that it would involve unreliable women. He definitely means Margaret here. And then he also says, I dislike being candid in public. He's struggling. Lymond is struggling because he's saying so many truths about himself in front of Christian, and he's so uncomfortable about it. At least I like to think this is the truth. I could be wrong. This could all be a lie, but I cannot see why he would be saying this to Christian otherwise. So, and then he admits that if the thing with Samuel Harvey doesn't work out, that he's not going to talk to Christian again. So at least he's protecting her there, because if he can't clear his name, he does know that he can't continue to see Christian. So he's given her that ultimatum there. And then said, well, if it does work out with Samuel Harvey and my name is cleared, then we'll meet out in the open with all of our normal introductions and our identities on full display. And then he leaves. And the last thing he says to her is, goodbye, my dear girl. I have never heard. That is probably the most endearing thing I've ever heard. It sounds honest. This is page 305. A woman with a familiar spirit. I won't promise any grand transformations. Goodbye, my dear girl. Like, he comes up to her. She smiles at him, and then he kisses her hand and then her cheeks. Straight after that, Christian decides to marry Tom Erskine, which I weirdly was not expecting, but I should have, because I've had to reflect on this and I realized that I am more immature than Christian, because Christian, being the extremely mature person that she is, and her body and spirit, what was the description? Sorry. Her body and spirit were in chaos after seeing Lymond. She was so happy to see him and delighted, I bet, deep down. It caused so much chaos in her. But she's seen truths about Lymond, that he really is probably not someone that she needs to keep being with. And even if things worked out and Samuel Harvey is brought back, even if Lymond's name is cleared, she knows in her extremely, amazingly mature psychological makeup that Lymond is not the person she needs, and the person she needs is Tom. And it's like that little reminder of seeing the chaos of Lymond. Even though they are kindred spirits in many ways, Christian and Lymond, she's glimpsed the chaos, seen that it is a real part of his nature. And it's made Tom suddenly look so much better. And I really love that. And that's why I think Christian is more mature than me, because I probably would have been in like body and spiritual chaos for a long time after Lymond has kissed me on the cheek. Anyway, I also just want to make a comparison here between Christian and Margaret Douglas. Margaret is like the devil on Lymond's shoulder, and Christian is like the angel. And we're getting two, I think, very real sides of Lymond brought out by these very different women. And both of those sides are a true and real part of Lymond, and that's why it's so fascinating. It's like that, one of my favorite quotes in the world, I'm going to get it, by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which is, the line separating good and evil passes not through states or classes or political parties, but right through every human heart, through all human hearts. It's one of my favorite lines because it's so true. I should probably frame it at some point, but it's kind of depressing. I'm gonna have to read some Russian literature after this as a palate cleanser. I never would have thought that Russian literature would be a palate cleanser, but between this book and the next one, I definitely need something to cleanse my palate. Okay, right. Anyway, what happens after this? Richard is released from prison. Richard. Oh my god, I love that description though of Richard coming back, striding back into the wedding, right to the same place where he had been, publicly undressed, and dares the universe to look down on him. That is a really cool description of Richard. I like it. And then Andrew Hunter's there. So everyone's at this wedding, okay? Everyone is there, but no one has seen Lymond because... Jesus. What? Where's Sibylla? Okay, well, maybe Lymond has that disguise where he like covers his hair or something like that. I imagine Lymond maybe dresses not in fancy clothes or something like that to disguise himself. So Andrew Hunter's there, and there's a line here at page 306 that says, this is when Richard has come back into the wedding. Dandy of all people knew how to handle such a situation, because Andrew Hunter is trying to have Richard make up with Sir Wat Buccleuch, and this is yet another little tick in the box of Andrew Hunter being very perceptive. Something's going on with this guy. He's like the guy in the murder mystery film that everyone overlooks because there's just too much niceness about him. I mean, I like him, but I'm starting to think that there's something else. Anyway, so basically what Buccleuch is wanting Richard's help now to capture Lymond, because he's now discovered that Lymond is going to sell his son, Will, and so he's now suddenly on Richard's side. And Coulter stares back at Andrew Hunter with acid humour. The millennium has come. Is this a Scot wanting to apologise? Two things at the end of this chapter. One thing I did not understand at the bottom of page 307 is that, and this is a little speech that Buccleuch gives about just general war stuff. He says, there in front of you is the price of the marriage we witnessed today. Oh, so they've found out that unfortunately John Maxwell's hostages, half of them have been killed because he's married Agnes, which is very dark. I wonder what the hell is going through John Maxwell's head right now. Like, literally the day he marries his wife is the day that I'm assuming that he knows all these hostages and is close to them, but he's just marrying this person whilst knowing that his loved ones are getting hanged because of it, and he's doing it in the name of peace for Scotland. What a great guy, but also, is he a psychopath? Or is he just really struggling? Maybe he didn't know the hostages really well, I don't know. But anyway, Buccleuch is saying, this is the price of the marriage we witnessed today, because they've just learnt about the hostages being killed, and no less the price of the marriage we avoided when we turned back after Durastir. What marriage? Sorry, I don't understand what he's talking about here. So he's saying that there's another price that they, because of a marriage they avoided when they turned back after Durastir. Durastir was the recent skirmish they had with the English when Margaret got taken hostage. I don't understand that though. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention in this chapter, page 308, is that Sibylla comes back and tells Richard about Mariotta's escape, and that Will helped Mariotta escape. And that she then says specifically, Lymond has not been kind. Which is fascinating because previously when she angered Richard, where earlier on in the chapter, it was the beginning of the chapter, it seemed that he was mainly antagonizing Richard because it seemed like she was on Lymond's side. And now she's kind of changed her tune. So she says, yeah, Lymond has not been kind. He does say that you ought to know that Lymond didn't harm her or the child, but it's kind of like now she's not helping Lymond. Once again, Richard proves completely inept with emotions, basically saying, I don't want to see my wife again, and Sibylla gets really angry because she once again points out to Richard, have you not considered that also your wife might not want to see you? I don't know, what are they going to do? Are they going to get a divorce? Because you can't get a divorce back in these days unless there's proven infidelity, right? Anyway, that is the end of this chapter. I will see you next time.